Hello and welcome to Raw Sound Entertainment's review of the top 500 albums of all time by Rolling Stone magazine. Today we are reviewing 494 on the list, Oracular Spectacular by MGMT. And we want to remind you guys, before you get into this, if you haven't listened to the album already, you should. It's good to follow along with us with a little bit of a basis in what we're talking about. And remember, give the dialogue with us on Twitter in the comment section below. All of the links are in the description to our Twitters, to anything. We respond to any comments that you leave. We'd love to talk with you. My name's Marshall.
And my name's Sam.
Let's get started. So, Sam, tell us about MGMT before we get to the album.
So MGMT is a duo comprising of two male members that come from New York State, and they made their first album, which is Oracular Spectacular, while they were in college, and they decided that it was going to be sort of a experimental piece, and actually it became much more successful than they expected, going all the way to Sony Music that would eventually pick it up. And it became a wild success, and a few of the songs on this album actually made it to the radio, and I've heard quite a few of these songs, not quite a few, but some of these songs on the radio before even listening to the album. And MGMT, just a fun fact, stands for management, so I don't know what they were thinking with that, but it's a pretty cool name.
It's cool, it's like the management.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a good name.
I like it. I wouldn't have thought it stood for that, so that's a cool name when it tricks you.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think that's awesome that they made it in college. You have all that creativity flowing. It's great for them.
I think.
Could you imagine making something for fun and then Columbia, Sony, like one of the largest companies of all time, one of the largest record companies, Columbia, comes to you and is like, "Hey, we want to publish your album." What?
It's almost like a PewDiePie effect, I think, where you make something for fun, and then it's like, oh shit, I could be making money doing this. Like, it almost like these guys don't sound amateur at all in their production value for sure. It sounds very professionally made.
Yep.
So I don't know if it was a passion project, and maybe they had the idea of making this a radio success.
I mean, I have a feeling that it was definitely what's the word? Redone almost after Sony picked it up. Probably. I have a feeling the original album that they produced in their dorm room was a little more raw than this. I definitely think there was some remixing by Sony's part, or by these guys, but using Sony's equipment. I think the album took some steps there in between picking it up and publishing. I doubt that we're hearing exactly what they created in the first place, but I'm sure it was very similar, and it sounds great for especially for their first album. Wow, and it's hard to top that. Like it's hard to and I don't really hear their songs much anymore. Do you?
I still hear Kids a lot. Kids.
No, I mean any of their new songs.
Oh no! I haven't heard anything since.
And Kids. I think that's sort of the problem of like they peaked really fast.
I think so. I think it's like after that, it's like, oh well, shit. I guess we'll just sleep on our bags of money then.
They have released quite a few albums since then, but enough about them. Let's get to Oracular Spectacular.
The album cover. Let's get to that first.
The album cover. So now the album cover shows the two band members.
Presumably. I mean,
most likely. I have no idea what they look like, but I'm guessing it's them. They are on what looks like to be a beach, and the ocean is behind them. I guess the beach because they're wearing bathing suits.
Yes. And
they are dressed in weird shit. The one on the right has a sling, and the one on the left is like a mixture of
animalistic almost.
Yeah, it's kind of in the dark. It's hard to see. Like the lighting isn't very good, but like almost like tribal clothing. And are those glow sticks?
I think so, maybe.
Yeah. It's really cool. You were talking about the font.
Oh, I love the font. I think the font is so cool. It's like almost retro future. That's what I get from the whole album cover is retro futuristic. Mm-hmm. Almost they're going for the 70s style with a bit of like almost sci-fi elements to it, because you get like the way that the writing is, the way the font in the middle from top down is very reminiscent of sort of neon and sort of futuristic type thing, you know?
Well, to me, the album cover reminds me, well, for one, I think the album cover was inspired by a couple of the songs in the album specifically. For the most part, the last song,
Future Reflections.
Future Reflections, if you listen to the lyrics on that, it talks a lot about, I think, and I'll get into what I think that song means later, but that song, I think, is what inspired the album art. And also, that song and the album art are very reminiscent, and stay with me here if you don't agree, very reminiscent of Lord of the Flies to me.
Oh yeah.
You know, the album itself, and I'll get into this, what I think it means. It's going to talk a lot about different, obviously about children, about youth, about different age groups, and different times in your life where you're a child, you're a teenager, you're an adult, whatever. And Lord of the Flies, I get that sort of feeling from a lot of the lyricism in this album, and from the cover art, I think really reinforces that, because they just look lost, and they're wearing whatever they've got. They're sort of wearing a mixture of like regular clothing and tribal clothing, and that to me is so Lord of the Flies. You know what I mean? I'm assuming you've read the book.
Oh yeah.
But if you guys haven't read the book, read it. I'm not gonna tell you what the book is. Anyway,
it's a decent one. I mean,
I really like it. I think it's a great children's book. Usually you read it when you're younger, but if you haven't, you might as well read it now. Okay, but yeah, that's the album art.
Very psychedelic, I think.
So let's kick off the review. What did you like about the album?
Well, a lot of things. I thought
it
was really, really good.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of the songs. Some of them were not as good as others, but they were all good. So again, we get sort of the same vibe as the same sort of positivity that we got in the last album. Not our last album, but 3 albums ago when we did the White Stripes. A lot of good tracks and then some great tracks. So they're all good. Some of them are great. The great ones that I thought were really good was the opening track, Time to Pretend, is possibly the catchiest song in this album, but it's hard to say which one's catchiest because they're all very catchy. Time to Pretend opens up with a really nice sort of simple keyboard riff, and the whole album has these old-fashioned keyboard, 70s keyboard type beats in the background. But Time to Pretend has the very distinct keyboard coming in right early, very synthesized, very almost robotic sounding. And then you get to Weekend Wars, which is a bit more of an acoustic track, but calling it acoustic is, again, a little bit of a far stretch because there's not very many acoustics in this. It's very electronic. But Weekend Wars, I thought was an okay song, but it really dropped off there all the way back to Electric Feel, where it picks up again with a nice, fast, hard-hitting beat. And then Kids, which we have very contrary opinions on, let me just spoil that right now, I thought was a really good song, and I loved it when it was playing on the radio. I think we might even own it on iTunes. I'm not sure, but
oh shit, yeah. iTunes,
iTunes, not a sponsor. I wish, but Kids, I thought it was a really good track. I think it's really catchy, and I think it has you've seen the music. Have you seen the music video for it?
I know.
It's really funny. It's a funny music video. It's a weird music video, but it really gives a meaning to the song, I think. And it's like a little baby, and he's getting chased by a monster, and it turns out at the end of the monster is actually the parents and everybody. So
yeah, that makes sense.
It's almost like the parents are imposing things on him and trying to shape him and trying to scare him into things. Like, there's a lot of pressures for a kid, right? There's like, go to college and get a job and do well at school and all these pressures, right? And then you can almost see that with the monsters in the music video. And I thought that really touched when the lyrics were, control yourself, take only what you need from me. It sort of ties in like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But
no, I know what you mean. I agree.
I thought that added a little bit more depth. And then Fourth Dimensional Transition, I liked as well. So
you're going over every single song.
I really like this album. And then finally The Handshake. That was my last track I liked. And then the rest were all good.
Okay. I agree for the most part. And I'll get into what he meant by my controversial opinions, but basically I also really like this album. I have to say that the lyricism on this album was almost Pink Floydian in its haunting, what's the word? Sort of nuances. its haunting nuances to certain. There was dark humor. There was a lot of things that screamed in your face, and then for 2 verses you wouldn't know what the hell's going on. So like it's really cool. At some points in this album, because I was reading along as I was listening to it, at some points in this album I didn't know if they were really good lyricists or completely insane, but I liked it. Sometimes there's a very fine line between good lyrics and crazy lyrics. But I think this album's lyrics really rode that line on a lot of the songs. My favorite song, it's hard to say. I actually really like the first and the last song the most. So for me, it's almost like a tie on those two. I also really like Weekend Wars, The Youth. Those two mainly because of the musical selections. I really like the music. The Weekend Wars, like you said, it's more of an acoustical vibe, which I'm more of a fan of personally. And also The Youth, I don't love the lyrics on that per se, just lyrically, but the lyrics flow really well with the music on that. Like it picks up, like you're saying, catchy. Using the word catchy a lot. I would say The Youth is catchy. It's hard to ignore the tunes that they put in that song. Electric Feel, good. Kids, Fourth Dimensional Transition, very good. I would say of Moons, Birds, and Monsters, that was a pretty crazy song, but I liked it. For the most part, I liked everything. And if I could say what I think this album is, basically, to me, because I was listening and reading along with the lyrics a lot, and I think, first, the album title, Oracular Spectacular. It means oracular is just another word meaning of oracle, basically, like of an oracle, from an oracle, which is basically, if you don't know,
a
fortune person teller. A fortune teller, someone that can predict the future. This song, to me, the Oracular Spectacular, is you yourself predicting your future, the inevitability of whatever path you have set yourself on, and the cold reality that whatever you have done has now set you in on whatever you are going to become, whatever you have become, And Time to Pretend really sets that theme from the very start, sets that theme in motion of just your fate is sealed. Because Time to Pretend is basically from the perspective of these crazy, not crazy, but basically people have made some bad life choices. And they know that they're screwed. I mean, the song ends by saying, "We'll choke on our vomit," and that will be the end. Okay.
Well, they're talking about heroin and cocaine and all these bad. Yeah. Like I heard that. I didn't look at the lyrics as much as you did, so you're teaching me a lot here. But I did hear that, and I was like, it sort of doesn't fit,
Yeah. Well, and so basically, that song was about they know they're screwed, but they just don't care anymore. They have given up. It is time to pretend now that everything's all right and that they don't know that they're screwed, and they're going to keep having fun, keep partying, even though they know they're going to choke on their own vomit one day and die. Like Elvis. I think that's how Elvis died. I don't know. Sorry, Elvis fans. It's true. Anyway, but yeah, so that's really cool to me. And the album ends after a lot of nuances throughout the other songs referencing to this and other things. The album ends with Future Reflections, which to me is sort of from the perspective of a child, much similar to what Kids is, to what of Moons, Birds, and Monsters almost even is a little bit hinting towards that. But Future Reflections is from the perspective, to me, of a child who doesn't know his future. It's saying future reflections, it's calling it that, but really they don't know what the hell is going to happen, and they're okay with that. They're not pretending they don't know what's going to happen. They genuinely don't. Their future has not been told yet. So a lot of the songs reference sort of age dynamics. The Handshake is sort of about growing up and not trusting authority figures. The Weekend Wars is about sort of a phase in your life where you're partying all the time. Like, they reinforce this idea of age dynamics, like what you're doing at certain times in your life. And I really like that. I will say this. He said that, he obviously, Sam referenced the fact that I'm not a fan of Kids. I think Kids fits in well with this album. The lyrics fit in well. The music fits in well. I just think it's not as good. It's not even close to as good as the other songs in this album, musically or lyrically. One thing I don't like about it is the music and the lyrics are very incredibly repetitive, like boringly repetitive. They have one verse on Kids, and then they repeat the chorus 14 times.
That's true.
Okay, that to me is a little annoying. And I'm not saying, oh, if you repeat something it's horrible, but they only had one verse. So there's not a lot to pick up from that song. And you said that there are very, like, it's catchy. I think that's how it was designed to be. I think Kids was designed to be catchy. That's why it's repetitive. Repetitive music is good at sort of being catchy, and that's why it made it on the radio and stayed on the radio. That might be a little controversial, but I mean, you can ask music theory majors. They'll tell you what makes a catchy song and what makes a not catchy song, and Kids has all of what it needs to be to really get in your head and stay in your head, with the repetitive lyrics, the repetitive chords. Anyway, I'm not saying it's a bad song, but to me, it just doesn't live up to the rest of the album. So Kids does drag this album down for me. I talked a lot just then. What's your least favorite part of the album? I don't think you said that necessarily.
Now we're running a bit long, but I think you can see both the passion for this album that we both have. So I think it's going to be okay for this episode to go a little bit longer to really talk about it, because it's an interesting one. It's very unique.
Oh, this is very good. This definitely needs to be higher up on the list.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so let me sort of talk about what I interpreted from this. I didn't go as deep into lyrics as you did. I just listened to what I could, and I think I listened to this album more than I listened to the White Stripes album.
Dang!
In total in the past few days. And I listened to these songs a lot. I went through it like, I think 9 times in the past few days. And it's been great. Like, it's an album that gets better the more you listen to it, because there's songs on here that the first time I listened to them I didn't like them, then by the 4th time I loved them. I thought they were really good. Like The Weekend Wars I didn't like the first time. Now I think it's a really good song.
Oh, I really like Weekend Wars.
Yes.
It's good, yeah.
Now, this is what I got from it. You said that you think it's from the future looking back on themselves, or do you think
no.
They're looking at their life as in being done, right? Like they're looking
I
at
think for the most part, this album is always looking forward, but I think it's looking forward from different perspectives. Like the first song and many of the songs on the album are looking forward from the perspective of a 30-year-old, 40-year-old person who is, mainly the first song, looking at it from the perspective of someone's life is already set in motion. Yeah. They have made the choices. They are locked in, and they're looking forward, and they don't like what they have to see, so they are shutting it out. They are pretending not to see what they're seeing. And I think, like, Future Reflections is about someone who can't see what is ahead of them, because there's so many different paths they could take. They haven't ruined their life yet. In a way, this album almost, like, Future Reflections could be the first song. And that's a really cool, you know what I mean? Like, that's a cool way they set up the album. I like that. That's sort of, its reversibility in the way they put the songs. Like, that's cool. That's the sign of a good album, when you could flip it around and it sounds just as good.
So, okay, so you look at it from that way, but I see it as talking about something a lot more innocent. I think they're just talking about memories from their childhood. Because if you look at it, Weekend Wars, it's like we're engaging in the Weekend Wars, right? So it's almost like they're getting off school, and then they can finally go and like get into their tree forts or whatever, and have the Weekend Wars in their neighborhood, and have like the different sides of the armies that are fighting against each other in their play fights or whatever, right? And that's where Time to Pretend comes in as well, right? They're pretending. Now, of course, that one has a deeper connotation, which I thought was really out of place in this album. I thought for sure that Time to Pretend was one of my favorite songs musically, but lyrically I thought it was sort of coarse compared to the rest of the album, because I thought a lot of it was very what's the word I'm looking for? Not naive, but very playful. It felt happy. And then Time to Pretend, they were talking about hard drugs and sort of depression and just not being happy the way it is, but not being very positive. It's like it just sort of felt out of place compared to Weekend Wars, where they're talking about engaging in the Weekend Wars and it seems very happy. The youth is talking about how the youth is changing. And that's sort of the main tagline of that song, the main chorus, as you would say, is the youth is changing and something we're changing with them. And it felt felt like it was talking again about the kids and about how they're progressing. But there was this really big sort of theme of youth. And that was really what propagated it for me, that there's this youth, and then the song Kids, of course. I mean, it's talking about kids, but then there's stuff like fourth dimensional transition I sort of got as, it's like going to the fourth dimension is like pretend world. It's like the fourth dimension is imagination. It's what you can't see. It's like your imagination, it's these kids' imagination during the Weekend Wars or during whatever, of seeing what's beyond, what adults can't see. And then the 2 tracks after that they're kind of forgettable, to be honest. And then the Handshake, secret handshakes as kids. That's how I got that. It's like it's like sort of a rite of passage, right? The handshake. And then future reflections is reflecting on your future as a kid, and then seeing that you're no longer a kid anymore.
I totally disagree with most of your analysis there, but I see what you're saying. I mean, like, I think definitely the handshake is more about not trusting the person you're shaking hands with. I view this from a much more negative point of view. I think it's less focused on youth and more focused on the times of your life in general. I think there is a focus on youth, because if you think about it, like if you were a 100-year-old person, what would be the first thing you would think about when you were a kid? Because that's probably the best your life is ever gonna be. Yeah. Unless you just had a shit childhood. But like, or even if you had a bad childhood, your childhood is what shaped who you are. You know, like more important stuff will happen to you from the age of 10 to 20 than will happen to you from the ages of 30 to 80. You know what I mean? Like, in a way, if you think about it, as far as how it shapes you as a person. By the time you're and to me, that's what this album is about. By the time you're 30 years old, you are either great or you are screwed. It's locked in. So I view this from differently. I view it as a sort of from that. I do think I mean, obviously from the title, it is about sort of looking into the future, but I think this is almost from the perspective. This album can be applied to anyone, and if it's applied to anyone, it takes more of a positive look. Like if I apply this to my own life, it's probably pretty positive. Like, yeah, my life's good, and it's yeah. But I think this specifically is applying to a fictional character who has fucked up.
Okay.
And who has viewed the world with this cynicism that he's built up, and now he's done. He's ready to shut the world away and just die from a comatose.
that's very, very negative, and I hope that's not what it is, because it could sort of change the way I see the album.
A lot of the albums I like are very negative. Like, honestly, if the album has a lot of dark themes, I'm probably going to like it more than an album with lighter themes.
Okay.
So that's probably why I viewed it that way, and that shaped my view of the album. But I really like it. Like, that makes me like it even more. That's the kind of person I am. I think a lot... I'm not a goth person. I'm not like gothic or punk, but I think the world is more interesting when you view it through dark-colored lenses.
Yeah, you see, and I disagree. I prefer to see it through happy-colored lenses. That's just the way I see it. So... That's very contrasting opinions. So, like, you like movies like Schindler's List, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, I can't, I don't like...
When I think of light-colored movies, I think of, like, romantic comedies and, like, feel-good movies, which are all bad.
No, I agree with you on that one. Those
when
suck,
I think of viewing the world from a darker perspective, I think of Quentin Tarantino.
Okay, maybe, but I like to see people enjoying themselves, right? So, like, Wolf of Wall Street was a fantastic... Now we're on movies.
Wolf of Wall Street was about a dude completely fucking his life over.
But he was having fun doing it. He was having a good time doing it.
That is a good view of Time to Pretend.
Maybe.
I think you're viewing the exact same scenario in a different way. You know? Like, I'm viewing it as he's ignoring his problems, and you're viewing it as he's having a good time.
Well, I see it as talking about childhood and kids and how...
I think it does that too, but
And then, also, if we look at the cover, they're dressed sort of like they're pretending, right? Like they're sort of like playing a game. That's another way to interpret it, I guess.
I agree, and I think, like, going back to the Lord of the Flies, I think a lot of the themes in this album are very Lord of the Fly-in. You know, I almost think these people, this character, whether he has a good life or a bad life, he's viewing his childhood almost like he was living in a jungle growing up. You know what I mean? In a very childlike way, in a very imaginative way, and I think that's why they selected that cover art. And I think that theme carries on through Future Reflections. It carries on through Of Birds, Moons, Birds, and Monsters. It carries on through Kids. It carries on through The Youth. It carries on through Weekend Wars. That theme, I think, you could, if this album went with a book, it would go with Lord of the Flies.
Okay. All right. Give us your rating here, Marshall. You give it to us first.
Okay, so when I first heard when I first started listening to this album, I was like 9, and then later on I was like what's that shit? 7. But taking all of the album into account, I'm going to give it a solid 8. It's really, really good. I like it a lot. The lyrics are awesome. It's amazing, but it is not perfect in my mind. So that's my score.
I was going to give it a perfect score. I was. But
Marshall corrupted you.
You didn't corrupt me. You just reminded me there's a lot of albums on this list. So I'm going to give it the strongest 9 I can give. How about that? It's like the strongest 9. It's like a 9.9. Like, it's right on the edge. Like, there's some.
But because of our scale, we rounded it back to 9.
It's now a 9. So it went right back down to 9. But it's a 9. And that's still a very good score. I think it deserves it. Go listen to this album. It was fun. We both had fun listening to it. I listened to it so much. There's 5 songs on this list that are on my playlist, which says something because it's quite a hard curation to get on my list, let me tell you.
Dang.
So,
yeah, I just threw the whole album onto my playlist.
The whole thing?
I usually don't listen to playlists for one thing, because I like listening to albums as a whole, because I think good albums are meant to be listened to that way. And so usually I don't even listen to playlists. I listen to albums. And so what I'll do is I'll sync up a playlist that goes in order through certain albums.
Yeah, I'd never be able to do that.
Yeah, that's how I listen to
I'm
music.
just going to pick
usually.
up the songs I like. So that's that. That's what I thought of the album. I thought it was fantastic, and I think it's a model album. I hope we see more stuff that's modern. I know there's not a lot of modern stuff on this list, but I love modern music. So I hope that there's more stuff on this list that is going to be modern and like this, because this was very innovative for the time, even today. Well,
the next album on the list is
super pumped.
Somewhat modern compared to a lot of the albums. Wilco. By the band Wilco, their album Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. It is released in 2002 and should be good. Rolling Stone's description of it is, Wilco's great leap forward was a mix of rock tradition, electronics, oddball rhythms, and experimental gestures. I think of Elvis when I hear that. Jeff Tweedy's lyrics pitted hope against doubt, with all bets off. So, that sounds really cool. I am already getting a feeling that this album is going to have a theme of duality to it, just from the album art and from that description. But we'll see. Have you heard the album before? I've never heard it, I don't think.
I've never heard it, but I looked at the list, the top 100 albums of the 2000s, and it is number 9 or something on that list.
Jeez.
So this is going to be...
What was Oracular Spectacular?
Oh, like number 18 or something? It was in the top 20 for sure.
So this is even... Okay, wow.
So then, this is exciting. I'm really excited.
I also think that's a good sign of, I think they asked a lot of old dudes to make this list.
Yes.
Because, when you look at the list of the top 100 albums, these two made it into the top 20, but on this list, they are in the top 490.
Yes. So, I don't know.
It's really?
There's a lot of stuff in the top 100 of this list, from 500 to 400. There's a lot of stuff from the 2000s, so that sort of makes me sad.
Yeah, it's sort of pushing. There's a lot of stuff all over the place. Actually, I'm looking. There's 70s, 80s, 70s, 90s, 70s, 80s, 2000. Anyway, but yeah, I'm excited about this one too. Looks really cool. I don't know what it sounds like, but the cover art's got me hyped.
Oh yeah, it looks like the towers in Kuala Lumpur.
See, I thought of Chicago. There are these 2 towers look just like that in Chicago. They're these really fancy apartment buildings, and those little, you see those little circles going up the towers?
Yes.
Each of those little circles on the actual buildings in Chicago are these glass-walled apartments. They're really fancy. But that's what it reminded me of. But I'm sure that might be a common building design just because it looks so cool. Anyway.
Now, in Kuala Lumpur, there's famous twin buildings that look identical to that. So I'll try to find the Chicago ones, but the Kuala Lumpur buildings are certainly on screen now, so you guys can make your judgment. But I digress. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed this episode, a longer one for sure. We went way over time, but that's because I think we both had some really interesting things to talk about this album, and I thought it was deserving of a longer time. And honestly, if we have more to talk about, we'll just go longer. I mean, fuck it. It's our show. We do what we want.
We never set how long the videos are going to be anyway.
Yeah, so hopefully you all enjoyed this. We certainly enjoyed this album. Go check it out. So check out our Twitter. listen along, do all those things, subscribe, like, all the stuff that everybody tells you to do. And we'll see you next time for the next video.